Now, we're all about space and place in this sphere, and this is my quintessential photograph of where I am residing. So the Front Range of Colorado is at the edge of two major ecoregions, a bit like Salzburg, being at the edge of the Alps, but you've got the high short grass Great Plains, high altitude short grass prairie in the foreground, and in the background is the beginning of the Rocky Mountain Front. The Rocky Mountain Front Range, which extends all throughout Colorado and up into neighboring states, Wyoming and New Mexico. But that is quite a biodiverse region because it is at the two ecoregion boundary. Also, that wave cloud, that lenticularis cloud that's up there, where you've got this wave action coming over the mountains from west to east, and as the air descends, you've got that window of descending air which is clear next to the mountains, and then as it ascends, you get this standing wave cloud which makes for beautiful sunsets. And in the wintertime, when we have that, it's usually there for several days, and it is an indicator of fair weather. When that anchored bank cloud, that lenticularis cloud is sitting there, it is a sign of fair weather. So I'm on my bicycle. You can see people on horseback. So just like Austria, a lot of people want to go to Colorado to recreate, hike, bike, canoe, fish, etc. And it is just like Salzburg in the sense that, population pressure, water, natural hazards, and other issues that we need to deal with. Another thing I want you to think about ever so briefly is what are those unique things that you like to do that perhaps none of your friends or colleagues likes to do? Embrace those and make them your own. Okay, so in my case, when I was a child, these are the kinds of photographs I took. There are very few people in my photographs. They're all of landscapes, cities, mountains, ridges. Again, nobody else that I knew liked to do that kind of thing. I would go into certain buildings or on certain mountain peaks and get just that angle, even as a young person. I love that kind of thing. Another thing that I did as a young person, and interestingly, I'm still making maps as an adult, but as a young person, I would sketch maps on poster board, big pieces of poster board with pens and colored pencils. So my maps had rivers, mountains, freeways, ports, railroad yards. I even had, in the right margin of this map, address ranges. Address ranges. What kid cares about address ranges? What child knows about address ranges? Nobody else in my circle of acquaintances enjoyed the same kinds of things, but those are the kinds of things that I like to do. So again, I'm sharing that with you on a personal note just because I want you to think about it's okay that you have unique gifts and talents. That's what makes us all humans, and has the potential now that you can bring to that organization wherever you happen to go and bring something unique that nobody else can bring to that organization. So embrace that and don't say, well, I was in retail for 10 years and that doesn't count for my next opportunity. Embrace that, saying what kinds of things did you do in retail that would bring you some unique gifts and skills to your organization. Okay? So I wanted to encourage you that way as well. Now what I want you to do is think about with me the 5 forces that really bring us to a pivotal moment. Now, just like many lists on the internet, and by the way, this whole thing is a story map that I'm presenting. I have a lot of content in this story map, and I'm going to paste it in this chat box now so that you can actually take a look at it and follow along with me. I have more content in here than I will be able to share in these moments that we have together, because I want you to be able to dig deeper into this in the coming days and weeks. I wanted to put more content for you all to explore on your own. I hope it's useful. But just like a lot of lists on the internet, the 5 coolest places to visit in Austria before you die, the 5 coolest bands of all time, right? These are debatable lists that I'm going to share today, and I welcome an interaction with you all and a debate or a conversation about, hey, Joseph, you missed this key force or this key trend in society. But I just submit to you all that these are 5 we should think about and embrace and consider how can we not just reflect these trends but forge them to a new frontier in geotechnologies. First of all, people are aware, they're geo-aware of issues and of problems and concerns on our planet that formerly just the geo-enviro community was talking about, right? climate, population change, biodiversity loss, ocean acidification, migration, political instability, natural hazards, inequalities. The list goes on, right? You all have things that you are very concerned about. Look, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, all those, water quality and quantity, and the list goes on. People in the general public now are at least starting to be aware of those and also recognize that those are complex problems that increasingly affect their everyday lives, right? They're global to local. They don't always tie to the things that you're studying in the geoinformatics program here, but at least they're more aware of these things than at any time in my career, and I'm sure Dr. Strobel can relate. Also, they're enabled. Now, I used to bring up the example of, hey, have you used a map on your phone to find your way across campus or to find your grandmother's house or whatever you're using this for, the public library? Then I started bringing up the example of, do you have a fitness app? You're recording your walks, your runs, your cycle rides. Do you use Strava? Do you use Runkeeper? Do you use another fitness app? As wonderful as it is to have those things, people are also now keenly aware, unfortunately, in the last 2 years of the COVID web mapping applications and dashboards. So for example, the Johns Hopkins University COVID map, which uses ArcGIS dashboard technology from Esri, but it is the most successful and most used app in mapping of all time. It has been viewed by the trillions, with a T, trillions. Why? Because it's so useful. People needed to know, do I need a mask as communities? Do I need to have a mandate, etc.? What areas are accessible on campus, and so on. So people are aware that these tools are around and are able to use some of them, at least in part, in their everyday lives. And the geotechnologies in the center there, I think having geotechnologies evolve to this web-based platform is absolutely transformational. Because in the days when Dr. Strobel and I started with geotechnologies, it was a desktop-centric only platform for many years. It was very difficult to share data. We never had enough RAM on our computers. It was difficult to obtain data and to get it all aligned, and many other technological challenges. Difficult to learn the software. There were manuals that you had to read. Their challenges were there. There's still challenges. There's still technological challenges, bandwidth and some other things, but it is vastly more accessible now that it is evolved to a largely web-based platform. Now, you students out there have music, right? That some is on your local device, but most of your music is actually on the cloud somewhere, correct? It's in Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon Music. It is wonderful to have that, right? That you can access ABBA's greatest hits anytime, anywhere. ABBA was a band. Anyway, the point is, you've got music in the cloud. Great. Wow, what a transformational thing. You also have documents in the cloud, correct? When you want to collaborate on a paper with a colleague, a classmate, or other person, you're putting it in where? Dropbox, Box.com, Google Drive, etc. You're putting it into some place. And either with music or these documents, you don't really care where it is located, right? Where is it located? Donde? It doesn't matter as long as you can access it at any time, anywhere. Great. You also have a fairly secure backup in case your hard drive crashes. And there's other advantages of having these other storage mechanisms for your documents. But the key is collaboration there with that latter example. So as wonderful as it is to have music in the cloud and have your documents in the cloud that you're sharing, I would again submit that it is even more wonderful to have geotechnologies in the cloud for three main reasons. Number one, the problems and issues that I mentioned that you could also put in the chat box, things that you're concerned about, do not stop at physical boundaries, correct? They're not one ecoregion or one valley or one mountain range or one biome. They transcend physical boundaries, correct? They also transcend political boundaries. They don't stop at your city, my city, Austria, Colorado, USA, right? They transcend all political boundaries. We all share these concerns and issues. And third, and perhaps even most importantly, they transcend disciplinary boundaries. So not just economics or city planning or civil engineering or business or environmental science or geography. They transcend all those boundaries. And hence, having geotechnologies in the cloud has opened up the dialogue between academic communities, between disciplines, which is something Dr. Strobel and I are very passionate about, is helping others in other disciplines, use geotechnologies. Why is that important? Because these problems that we talked about, they're complex. They require multiple inputs from people with multiple backgrounds from multiple parts of the world. And so having this cloud-based platform where we can collaborate and share our results of our research in a story map, for example, and being able to share methods with a model that we share online so that you can adjust it and put your variables in or substitute your region in for my region, etc., and run the model again. That is transformational. And that's helping move geotechnologies from this sort of specialized small niche community that had been for many decades into a global set of ways of understanding the world. That's how we're going to solve these problems. So geotechnologies in the cloud is transformational in many ways. We could spend the whole time talking about that alone. But we need to move on. Citizen science goes back to the 1900s, 1800s, and even before, one could argue, with the birding communities and others taking careful notes on the type of bird, the species of the tree it was in, the time of day, the time of season, the plumage on the bird, the call of the bird, etc. And now moving into pine beetle infestation, weather, water quality, urban greenways, trails, and so many other communities where people are submitting data to citizen science portals of various kinds. That has been transformational in geotechnologies as well, in part because government agencies and even private industry, they do not have the field staff, budget, time, or money to have people in the field collecting the kind of data that people are requiring. So we're relying on citizens, sure, thinking about data quality all the while, but for example, OpenStreetMap, a widely cited success story of people taking mapping into their own hands and saying, we need a mapping digital system for our country because we have no mapping agency or that mapping agency won't share their data with the general public. And there are many other examples. And finally, storytelling with maps. Now, this whole presentation, as you know from the chat box, is a story map. I still use Prezi, I still use videos, I still use PowerPoint. I use other techniques to share my story, my presentation, my workshops. But I also use story maps, especially if I want to embed interactive web maps in them, which I have here. So storytelling, maps have been used to tell stories for thousands of years, correct? Babylonian clay tablets, Al-Idrisi's map of silver in the 1100s. That would have been great. Those two big plates of silver, that would have been heavy too. Wood blocks, and 100 years ago onto copper plates and film that we could then reproduce into paper maps and aerial photos, and then more recently in digital form. And now embedded into a wide variety of multimedia, web pages, videos, etc. It's a fascinating world, it really is, but storytelling with maps. Maps have always been used to tell a rich and deep story in a small amount of space, whether that space was in the past on clay tablets or stone tablets or on film or on paper or in the digital world. Maps have always been very compelling. They also have this air of authenticity. People tend to believe maps, and that has implications for data quality and ethics that we'll talk about here in the next 4 hours. Just kidding, we don't have 4 hours. Just wanted to make sure you students were on your toes. Okay, we need to move on.